Journey EVR event presented by CPA BC, the Chartered Professional Accountants of British Columbia. My name is Natalie Williams and I'm a Student Recruitment Officer at CPA BC, and I would like to thank you all for joining us here today. My role at CPA BC is to work with the student recruitment team to inform and inspire future CPAs, and in today's event we hope to do just that. Give you an opportunity to learn about accounting from real CPAs and CPA candidates and to ask your own questions. Before we proceed, while we are meeting on a virtual platform, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the land which we each call home, wherever that may be, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional territories of the Squamish, Musqueam and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, on whose traditional territories the CPA BC offices are located. We do this land acknowledgement to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples. Please join me in a moment of reflection. Thank you. So here is a quick overview of our agenda for today. Today's session will be around 60 minutes and we will have a live Q&A in the last 20 to 25 minutes or so. So you can submit your questions using the chat function down below, and I will address them at the end of the presentation. If you did not submit a question beforehand, you will still be able to ask your questions again by typing it into the Q&A. We do have two CPA BC staff members in the back end that will be answering some of your questions live. And we have Jing and Suzanne, who is our candidate support expert as well. So thank you both for answering those questions for us in the back end. The first few minutes will be an audience polling question. Followed by an introduction to our guest speakers as well today. So without further ado, let's get started. So as mentioned, we will do a quick poll so that we can understand our audience. So the question reads, which of the following best describes your current status? Are you a working professional, recently graduated post-secondary student, a current post-secondary student, working professional with an international accounting designation, a high school student, or do you fall under the other category? Let's give it a few more seconds. We'll try and get 100% participation. Okay, so we'll get Jing to share the results. It looks like most of you are working professionals, so around 44% of you. We have a few, just one recently graduated post-secondary student. We have some in the working professionals with international accounting designations. And most of you are, current post-secondary students. So it's nice to see a nice mix of people tuning in today. So thank you very much for taking part. So just a quick overview of CPA. So for those of you that don't know, CPA stands for Chartered Professional Accountants. We have organisations on the national and provincial levels. So on the national level, we have CPA Canada, which work with the provincial and territorial CPA bodies domestically and with accounting bodies of other countries internationally. One of the world's largest accounting bodies with more than 200,000 members across the country and around the world. And on the provincial level, we here in BC have CPA BC and our regional office, the CPA Western School of Business, which is in charge of regulating the profession within the province. We are here to train future CPAs, regulate and look after current CPAs, as well as protect the public. CPA BC is one of the largest professional bodies in BC, with over 38,000 CPA members and 6,000 CPA students. CPA BC members are also members of CPA Canada. Okay, so there are two reporting routes that candidates have the option to choose from when they are reporting their practical experience, and both lead to the same goal, which is a newly certified CPA. Now, the choice is up to you, but it also depends on your employer. So let's start with the pre-approved program route, or what we call PPR for short. Now, this reporting path is characterized by experience that has been approved upfront by the profession. That means that the employer has a relationship with CPA BC, and the role that the CPA candidate is performing has also been pre-approved. Our staff work with employers to create a competency map that articulates exactly how, over the course of the 30 months, the candidate will develop enough proficiency in enough technical competencies to meet the practical experience requirements, also known as PER. Because this map is so prescribed, it is expected and it is understood that if a candidate starts on this path, that they will complete it in its entirety in order to fulfill the requirements. This is a training program that is designed to take a full 30 months and to meet the practical experience requirements. So that, in a nutshell, is what characterizes the pre-approved program route. Now, if an employer is not pre-approved, then a candidate must report under the experience verification route, also known as EVR. Now, the EVR reporting route allows candidates to report experience at an employer of choice. Unlike PPR, there is no pre-approved training program or competency map to follow. And so the candidate is responsible for demonstrating that their work aligns with the practical experience requirements. It can often take candidates longer than the 30 months or more than one job to demonstrate enough proficiency to meet PER. Under EVR, a candidate may transition to different jobs within the company or even different companies. And this route is self-directed because it is the candidate who is carving out their own path, creating their own competency map and setting their own course based on where they would like their career to go. So those are the differences of the two reporting routes. With that being said, and as you can see in the graphics on the screen as well, and there are also a lot of similarities between the two routes as well. So in both instances, the experience needs to be relevant, it must be paid, and it has to be progressive as well. So you will be reporting semi-annually in both instances, and you will need to be adequately supervised and have ongoing mentorship, and all the experience will be assessed by the profession. Hopefully that gives you, a better understanding of both pathways. This, as you know, this particular webinar is focusing on the EVR route. So we've got 3 panelists today who I'm very excited to introduce you to. So it is my pleasure to introduce our guest and featured speakers. First up, we have Jennifer Chun, who is a CPA. And Jennifer is the blogger behind Jen Thinks and a senior accountant at Incognito Software. On Jen Thinks, she shares her journey to becoming a CPA from Core 1 to passing the CFE and getting approval for her practical experience requirements. For her 30 months, for the 30 months experience, sorry. She started at accounts payable and finished as a revenue accountant. Currently, she handles the full revenue cycle from invoicing to revenue recognition at Incognito Software. She's also an Excel nerd. Using the tool to make her job more efficient is her favorite part of the job. It's my pleasure to introduce Jennifer Chun. Welcome, Jennifer. Oh.
Hi, everyone.
Thanks for being here, Jennifer. And next up, we have Carly Scott, who is also a CPA. Carly Scott is the Assistant Controller of the Investment Department at Bosa Family of Companies. She leads the accounting team responsible for capturing and evaluating the performance of diverse companies in the investment portfolio, ranging from meta-prop funds to operating businesses like cafes. She first joined Bosa in the property accounting team and assisted with the implementation of the Yardi accounting system. After 4 years in property accounting, Carly joined the investments team and started her new role as assistant controller. So welcome, Carly.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here.
Thanks for being here, Carly. And last but certainly not least, we have Paul Rosberg. And Paul is a current CPA PEP candidate. So Paul has been working in public practice for the past 5 years and is currently a senior accountant at K. Jeske and Company. He originally pursued a career in teaching, but he realized in 2016 that he wanted to change paths. Paul entered the CPA Prep in 2016 and then the CPA PEP in 2019. And he successfully wrote the CFE in 2021. Congratulations, Paul. Professionally, Paul is passionate about corporate and personal tax, as well as helping smaller businesses grow. He lives in New Westminster with his wife, and in his spare time, he enjoys camping trips, hiking, and bike rides. Welcome, Paul.
Hi, it's nice to be here. Thanks for the introduction, Natalie.
Thank you. So you all have the same thing in common, and that is that you all chose the experience verification route. So let's start with, why did you choose that route? Jennifer, if you'd like to go first.
Sure. So when I started PERT, I was already working in the industry, and my employer wasn't part of the pre-approved route. So naturally, just EVR is how I started.
Awesome. And Paul, why did you choose the EVR route?
So the reason why I chose the EVR route, really it came down to where I ended up getting my first position. So I was applying at different firms, and I was looking for a position in public practice, and the one that ended up being the right fit for me was one that wasn't pre-approved, and so EVR it was for me.
Awesome. And same question for you, Carly.
Yeah, so when I was looking into doing my CPA, most of the pre-approved routes were with firms, and I didn't really have any interest in working with a bunch of different companies on only one little part of a project. My goal for completing the CPA was to completely understand a business from start to finish, and working with a firm didn't really fit with that. And also, I already knew which industries I sort of wanted to work with. Be that either hospitality or real estate, which is what I eventually chose. And I didn't really need the experience with a firm to pick which industry I liked. So that's why I chose this route.
Thank you. So the next question is, what doors did this pathway open? So perhaps you can tell us a little bit about what you currently do and how you got there. So let's start with Carly. We'll go back to you.
Sure. So I started with BOSA as an intern, and then went into the property accounting function, and then eventually got the role of assistant controller in investment. Because I chose this experience verification route, I got to plan my own career path, and got to experience a whole bunch of different roles within the company. And because of the requirements that I needed, my company was happy to bring me on any special projects to get that experience that was required. So I learned about everything from treasury to AP to AR to audit, and then the implementation was a huge part of it as well.
Great. And Paul, same question to you.
Sure. So, I mean, I work at a small public firm. So one of the doors that was open for me, because we're small, getting the firm pre-approved didn't really make sense, I think, for this firm. But then there's the advantages that come with that. So right away, when I was a junior accountant, my first year, I got to be exposed to a lot of different types of work. So I'd work on trust, and this has been through my whole experience, but I'd get to work on trusts, corporate tax returns, reviews, notice to readers, both financials, bookkeeping, personal tax returns, and so on. So there's a whole range of things, and I get to touch on the whole process from start to finish. So, and I would get to interact with the clients as well. So it was really interesting being able to be a part of the whole process, as opposed to being kind of put into a more focused role where I don't quite get to take everything the whole way through. So I feel like this experience has helped me to get a little bit of a more well-rounded experience, in my opinion.
Great. And Jennifer?
I think what I was going to say is very similar to what Carly and Paul described, because I was on the experience route, and as long as you're vocal about it, you are almost like the first person in everyone's mind if they have something new or something more challenging, because they know you needed it. And then it also forced me to get out of my comfort zone, because this is self-paced. No one's going to give me what I wanted unless I ask or unless I look out for it. So it pushed me to be constantly on the lookout for more experience, and it gave me no excuse not to progress in my career, just because I knew I needed it if I wanted to get designated.
Great. And before we move on to our advanced submitted questions, do you have any advice or insights for people who are thinking of choosing the experience verification route? Let's go with Paul first.
Sure. I mean, generally, if you're thinking of going the experience verification route, I would say you just want to be, I mean, you're probably doing the right thing being at this webinar, is you want to be proactive and gather the information that you need, because it is a little bit more self-directed. And so you need to know what you need, and you need to make sure that you're getting that. So gathering the resources that you need, going to these webinars, that's going to be really important. The other thing is, and I think we've got a question on it that we'll deal with in the next slide, is making sure that wherever you're working is going to meet the experience verification requirements.
Great advice. Carly?
Yeah, well, with either route, you need to build sort of your moral or your support team. But it's especially important in the experience verification route because you need to be able to ask for those opportunities. So building up that confidence to be able to ask for what you need, but it also gives tons of opportunities to advance as well, which is always great.
Brilliant. And Jennifer, any advice?
My advice is more on the emotional side of the whole process. It is gonna be hard. It's hardest in the beginning. It gets a bit easier towards the end, because unlike the other route, there's just a lot more writing involved. So communication skills are key to passing, I think, the PERT with experience route, but it can be done.
Awesome. Thank you all for those and for your advice and insights as well. So now we're going to head over to our advanced submitted questions, and I will call on you all individually to answer these ones. So the first question from one of our audience members is during, oops, just bear with me a moment. So during the job application or interview, how can you be sure that the employer is able to give you sufficient and valid experience that is required? So let's go to Jennifer to answer this one, please.
The only way you will know is ask. Well, obviously, when you apply for the jobs, check the posting beyond the title, because sometimes like the same title can imply a lot of different offense work or like entry work. But what I did when I got my current job, that was when I was about halfway through my PERT, I asked the manager, who is now my boss, what he did day to day, only because my intention is for him to pass on his work to me when I am ready to progress, so that I can get the experience I need. And from asking, you can also tell how supportive they will be in the next 12 to 16 months, because it worked well for me. They were supportive during the interview process. They were supportive throughout. And I think knowing as early as possible will save you a lot of like tough time later, because once your workplace is aware of what you need out of them, they will just keep you in mind when those opportunities arise. So make sure you ask, and just don't wait until you started the job.
Excellent. Thanks, Jennifer. And the next question is, have you always known that you wanted to have a career in accounting, or did you have a shift in career? And I think Paul is the perfect person to answer this, because as mentioned in your bio, you used to be, was it a teacher?
I was working towards that. So I actually was
Oh,
in
okay.
their practical experience program with SFU to work towards that. I guess I can go ahead and answer it. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
please do. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know that I wanted to be an accountant until about 2015 or 2016. I mean, I've always known that I have an analytical mind. So, you know, when I went through university, I didn't even know I wanted to be a teacher at one point, actually quite far into my university education. So I took a whole slew of different courses. I took some accounting courses, I took some law courses, I took programming, so on and so forth. So I wasn't even sure about teaching, but accounting, yeah, it was about 2015 or 2016. It was a sudden change for me. And what I would say about that is what was helpful in switching and kind of knowing that, because, you know, I went into teaching and that wasn't for me. Well, why is accounting for me? What was helpful is actually I had a friend who's a CPA who I got to sit down with and talk about the process, talk about what the job was, get an idea of what the job was. And when I heard a little bit more about what was entailed in accounting, it just made sense to me. And thankfully, I had already had my 4-year degree with SFU. So the prep program, which CPA Canada offers, helped me to fast track into the PEP program. So the transition was smooth, and being able to talk to somebody about it in 2016, 2015 really helped me to solidify the decision.
Excellent. And next question, we'll come to Carly. What motivated you to keep going and finish the program during your hardest times?
Well, there was definitely some hard times going through those endless study days. I'm not sure if anybody has seen the show This Is Us, but there's one point where there's a couple and they're struggling to keep working at their career. And they say to each other every time they feel a struggle, big house, fancy car. And although money isn't the only reason why I completed my CPA, it was a pretty good motivator to get me through those really, really hard study nights.
That's a great answer. I do love that program as well. And the next question, we'll go back to Jennifer. So, how is the EVR? How is EVR different to PPR? And how can you decide which one to choose?
So I know you already addressed a bit earlier, Natalie, but I think the biggest difference, my understanding is the reporting requirement. With EVR, because you have the flexibility and freedom to choose which competencies you want to aim for, it's up to you how you report it. But with PPR, obviously, the 30-month program is already pre-approved and designed for you. So you only have to report on the enabling soft skill side. So that is definitely the biggest, I believe, difference between the two. For me personally, having the flexibility of choosing when and where I work, it's probably like the biggest perk of the experience route. Because if you're just starting your finance career, you don't know what industries you want to be in. You don't know what roles or what tasks you want to be doing. So not being in a pre-approval would give you the freedom to change your mind and like adjust your plan as you go, because as you already mentioned, you are expected to finish the 30 months with the same company by following this exact route. So ultimately, I think it depends on how you want to spend that 30 months of work experience you need. If you think the extra reporting that comes with EVR, it's worth it for the flexibility that it can offer, go for it, because like I have to mention again that it can be done. It's actually not as bad as some online postings might seem, even though it's not easy. But if you think the comfort of knowing your path is already set up for you, I also think that could be really attractive, especially when you have the coursework also going and then you have to prep for CFE, which can be really exhausting at times.
Yeah, there's definitely pros and cons to both routes, and it's definitely dependent on the individual as well. Yeah, for sure. So the next question is, please share about the experience of finding a co-op job or an accounting related job before becoming an accountant. Paul, if you'd like to answer that one.
Sure. Yeah, my answer is pretty short because I didn't have a long job hunt, but so first I switched into accounting, and I took some prep courses to get a foundation, a little bit of an understanding of accounting before I started looking for jobs. And then once I was into just between intermediate accounting 1 and intermediate accounting 2, I started looking for a job. So I was looking for a junior position, a junior accounting position in a public firm. I was looking to do exactly what I'm doing right now, which is working on financial statements and preparing tax returns. So that's what I looked for, and that's actually what I found. So I was fortunate enough to find a firm that was looking for, they just had a position open up, and I think I applied the same day that it opened up. So I was fortunate that my job hunt wasn't too long. But that was my experience. I looked for a relevant position right on the onset. So I had considered other things like maybe, I don't know, like a bookkeeping position that's strictly bookkeeping, but ultimately I wanted to get relevant experience from the get-go, and I was fortunate to get into that junior accounting position.
Great, thanks, Paul. And the final question for the advance submitted before we open up for the live Q&A. What motivates or hinders you from reporting your practical experience? Do you rely on your supervisor and or mentor for feedback on your practical experience requirements? Carly, if you'd like to answer that one.
Yeah, I definitely had a very hard time motivating myself to complete the final experience report. The 12-month one was okay. I knew when the deadline was, I got it out of the way. But for that final reporting, I had finished the CPA, I had passed, and I felt like I had done all my work. But I actually had a lot more work to do on the final experience report, and it took me about a year after I had passed the CP to get the practical experience done. I did have the experience. I just writing those reports is very hard to motivate yourself to do. But the motivation came from knowing that once the more years that I had my CPA would always look better on my resume. So I knew that I needed to get it done. And then the second question, my supervisor and mentor had completed their CPA a very long time ago, back before it was the combined CPA. So their feedback on the practical experience wasn't as helpful. So I reached out to somebody else within my company, since there's quite a few people who had recently passed the CP and got them and done their practical experience. So I got them to review and read over my reports before I submitted them, and that really, really helped.
It's really good knowing that you have people that have already gone through the process that you can refer back to. So Jennifer and Paul, did you both have people maybe growing up or people that you work with that have already been through the process?
My manager also did not go through what we went through. He also did his destination a long time ago, but I think it was helpful to either read it after you write it after a while, or ask someone else to read it, because sometimes what you think is being written in the report is actually not on the paper, and then the reviewer won't be able to see it. So not necessarily someone who has gone through the route, but just like understanding what you're trying to convey, that helped.
Yeah, I find I've had something similar with that. So I mean, I've kind of kept a little bit of a network of people, so in WhatsApp, and there are people who I've gone through the program with, who are some are done writing their experience reports, some are in the process of them. So having that network where you can kind of ask questions is really helpful. But I also had a coworker who worked at the firm here, who finished his experience reporting about a year before I finished the CFE. So I'm not sure now, it's maybe about 2 years ago, he got a CPA, something like that. So he was able to share his experiences about how he had to do experience reporting in basically the same role that I was doing. So that was really helpful. It kind of gave me a little bit more direction and a leg to stand on with what to write. But ultimately as well, a lot of what I was writing was my own experiences. So it did kind of come back to me in the end as well. I mean, I'm still obviously writing some experience reports here. So I've relied on some of the information I've gotten from CPA Canada as well to kind of give myself some feedback.
Awesome. So I'm just going to hop over to our live Q&A. It doesn't look like we've got a whole bunch of questions coming through right now. So I do have some backup questions, but just as a reminder to our participants today, you can type your questions in the group chat. It doesn't just have to be, you know, EVR specific. If you have any questions about the program, work-life balance, anything like that, just type it in the group chat and I'll ask the questions live on your behalf. But until we get some questions coming through, speaking of work-life balance, how did you balance, you know, going through the program with a social life and all the other things that life throws at you? Jennifer, if you'd like to take that one, we'll get you all to answer that one, I think, because it is a question that gets asked quite a lot from our audience members.
Well, my personal experience is because I knew early on that work-life balance was what I was looking for. So I did avoid firm jobs that require really long hours. And I think another part is setting boundaries as early on as you can, simply because I don't believe long hours mean best work. So as long as you can prove that you can efficiently do your work within a reasonable hours, then work-life balance, because then you can get off work on time. Most of the time, obviously, we still have our busy period. So to set boundaries, I think is the most important piece, because oftentimes when you're starting your career, you're not sure what is reasonable and what is not reasonable. And with pressure, you're just gonna go with it. And next thing you know, 5 years pass and you had a really bad time. So I think it's okay. Don't believe that just because someone else more senior is telling you this way, it has to be the right way. Yeah.
Thanks, Jennifer. And Paul, work-life balance, how do you manage it?
Work-life balance, it's a difficult one because it's so individualized. I mean, I've been fortunate. The firm that I work at has pretty flexible hours, so it can differ firm by firm, and I'm not sure what other people's experiences would be, but our hours are quite flexible, and we have the ability to work remotely or in the office at times, so that helps as well. In terms of kind of balancing the CPA program with work, there is a bit of juggling there. Sometimes you'll have something that you want to hand in the same day that you're needing to work till 8 p.m. So keeping a calendar, keeping an agenda, and knowing what's ahead of you is going to be really helpful. The social side of things, so family, friends, loved ones, I think that's just individual. I've managed somehow. I think part of that's just knowing what my schedule is and letting people know a day or two ahead if I'm going to have to grind on something till midnight. Just knowing what you need to do and keeping on top of your schedule is going to help, because then you can be proactive, communicate with people, and plan for your day ahead of you.
Great advice, especially coming from somebody who's currently going through the program as well. And Carly, when you were going through the program, how did you find that work-life balance?
Yeah, so very similar to Paul. My work schedule wasn't as flexible. It was mostly, I did 8 to 4:30, but I definitely scheduled my time. So throughout every module, I had a calendar at the beginning of the module, and I put in, these are my study days, these are my study hours. Sometimes they varied, but especially studying for the CFE, I had specific study days, study hours, and then I would have specific time off where I would not study, pretty much no matter what, unless there was some looming deadline, but definitely studying for the CFE. I think I took Sunday afternoons off, and that was a complete game changer. That was some suggestion that somebody else had made, and just scheduling those time off is extremely important.
Great. And another question is, what would be one thing about being a CPA that would surprise people? We'll go back to you, Carly, for this one.
That's a hard question. I don't know. I think it surprises me how much people know about CPAs who have no idea what accounting is. They know that CPA is this big deal, and they know how hard, even without going through the program, because they have seen people go through it, they know how hard work it is, which is really good when you're telling friends that you can't hang out for 2 months because you're studying. So that kind of surprised me a little bit anyway.
Awesome. So we have got some questions coming through now. So the first one is, any recommendations or suggestions for approaching your employer if I am looking for higher level experience or duties to fulfill my experience requirements? Jennifer, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I think it's important that if you're asking for experience that you need for PERT, make sure you be very specific. So go through the competencies and think about what your boss, because most likely it's going to be a boss or someone else on your team that will be passing on the work to you if that happens. So be very specific, because they will need time to plan. It might not happen for another quarter. It might not happen. It might only happen for year end. So the more guidance you can give when you ask for more experience, the easier it is, and the more likely that they will keep you in mind when those opportunities arise. Because I think as of now, a lot of the managers, so they would have gotten the designation a lot earlier than us. So meaning they actually have no idea what the competency map has. So it is on the candidates to do as much homework to make it as easy as possible for them, so they can help you in return.
Great answer. Thanks, Jennifer. And the next question is, how much time should I expect to put into each experience report? Paul, are you able to answer that one?
I can. I'm not sure if I'm going to be a good benchmark for it. I found I probably put too much time into some of them, and that can be a little bit of a pitfall as well. I think at one point I heard, and I could be corrected if I'm wrong, I heard about 20 hours is sort of the benchmark. It's really just going to depend on you, because ultimately your experience report's done when you've written it and you're ready to hand it in. So however long that takes you is however long it takes. I would say about 20 hours might be a good general benchmark. My most recent one took a lot longer. You can end up, so if you're a little bit more proactive and you're writing your experience as you experience it, it might be a little bit quicker. I found where I lost time, or where it took a lot of time for me, was when I was trying to catch up some of that experience. I'm trying to think of what I did and make sure that I'm accurate, but also providing the details of what happened. So if you're trying to think back on months ago or even a year ago or longer, that can be really difficult to catch up and to get the required detail into that experience report. So keeping up on it's really helpful, but I guess 20 hours would be a good benchmark, but I really haven't timed myself on them, unfortunately.
Thanks, Paul. Maybe we'll bring in Carly or Jennifer to answer that question as well. Do you remember sort of how long?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly how long, because I always did it in parts. I would never sit down and try to write an entire experience report. And as well, I would submit it as I went. So I would fill in 2 sort of questions, answer 2 questions, which would probably take me about an hour each to write, and then submit it, and then get feedback on it, and then be able to write the next one. So yeah, because I submitted them constantly, I don't really know in total how long it would take.
I also don't know how long, but I wanted to echo what Paul was saying, is that if you write about it, like as you experience it, is 100 times easier, because to get a level 2 marking, a lot of it is your thought process that you went through as you were working on the task. So 3 months later, you might not remember when you struggle to get that analytics done. So if you write it as you experience it, it'd probably be like 30, 45 minutes. If you didn't, it'd be like 2, 3 hours because you're just constantly trying to think of what you did 3 months ago.
That's really good advice. And the next question is for all panelists. So this person wants to know if any of you have pets or children that require daily time commitments, and how do you manage the long days?
I actually got a puppy about halfway through my CPA, and I am assuming children, well, I know that children probably are a lot more distracting, but the puppy was somewhat of a good distraction because I had to take her out for those walks. So as I was saying before, like taking those mandatory breaks from your studying, I actually think that she probably helped me get through the CPA because she forced me to take her on those walks and take a little bit of a break from studying.
And what puppy is it? What breed?
She's an Australian Shepherd.
Very
So
cute.
lots of walks needed.
Yeah, lots of energy. And what about Paul, Jennifer? Do you have pets or children? No.
Oh, sorry, Paul. I'll take the lead here. So, I don't have any pets or children, so that makes it a lot easier. I did get married while in PEP, just before an exam, so that was difficult. But I actually had to have a little bit of humility and pay to defer one of my exams around that time. So that was helpful. As far as managing the long days, it hasn't been too bad. I've been able to, like, my parents have dogs, and then my wife's parents have a dog, and we walk those dogs, and I've got nephews, and we go and we babysit the nephews. The schedule hasn't been too bad. It's really going to be dependent on how you study when you're in the program, and then the hours that are required of you at your work, and your job may differ. If it's a lot of hours, it might be a little bit different. For me, I've been fortunate that the hours have been reasonable. Of course, when you get to the CFE, you'll have to lock down for a little bit to study. That's or at least in my case, I did. But the rest of the year, it hasn't been too bad in my case.
Great.
I don't
Thanks,
have
Paul.
pets.
You
I don't
don't?
have children. No. But I think one thing, because I was trying to keep my blog like as up to date as possible, so that took away a lot of the time. However, I think Carly or Paul mentioned like planning is key. If you go into a day without knowing what you have to get done or what you cannot get done, then like a lot of time it just all of a sudden went to Netflix or like anything that's more fun. So whatever your commitments are, you need to know what your goals are and prioritize before you let yourself just do the easier stuff. I think it's how you can manage, because it can get really demanding at times.
Yeah. And this next question is it's specifically for Paul, actually. So can you please provide some more detail of the work that is helping you meet the EVR requirements?
Sure. So what was really helpful for me was getting, so in my case, the firm doesn't do audits, but you need to have assurance experience if you're going to be doing the public practice route where you're doing basically financials and tax. You're going to need to have assurance. So our firm does reviews, which is sort of right in between a notice to reader and an audit. It's right in the middle. It is assurance work, and it's going to meet those assurance hours that you're going to need. That was really helpful in making sure that I'm getting the experience I need. It helps to round out, so in the technical competencies, it helps to round out the financial reporting competencies that you need. And then it also helps under audit and assurance competencies. So there's 4 financial reporting competencies and 3 audit and assurance ones. And if you do reviews, you're probably going to get some enough relevant experience in those sections. The other side, tax. Reviews are going to help with that, but honestly, doing personal tax returns, doing tax planning for businesses, for corporations, for charities, and doing other kinds of tax work, you'll kind of know, because you can look at those technical competencies, and there's going to be I know that there's a document that you can read to see what level 2 competencies are and what level 1 competencies are, and you can determine if you're meeting them by looking at that document. But essentially, if you're doing tax work and you're getting your hands on the process from start to finish, you're probably going to get enough tax experience as well. What I will say for tax is, if you feel like you're just sort of, after a year or two, you've been doing kind of the same thing, so you're doing tax returns for corporations, and they're not too complex, you're just doing wages and dividends as part of the tax planning, and there's not really any corporate reorgs or a wind up or something like that, then you can go to your supervisor and you can talk about whether they can put you on one of those, because it may be that they're just not giving it to you because somebody else has expertise in it and they want to save time on the file. Or you could ask to possibly do a secondment, something where you wait until another firm has one of those files come in, and maybe you go and you do put a few hours in at the other firm, and you get a chance to work on something a little bit more complex.
Thanks, Paul. And the next question is for all panelists. So what are some good resources, if any, that helped you map out your relevant competencies and better understand competency requirements? Carly, are you able to answer that?
Sure. So I think at the very beginning, when I was trying to map everything out, I printed out the wheel. I'm not sure if that's still used, but there was a wheel that said you need this many of 2s and this many 1s. And then I went through and I highlighted the sections that I thought I could get the 2s and the 1s in. And then I went to my manager and I worked through with her what type of experiences would be needed for each competency that I wanted to achieve a 2 or 1 level at. And then we just put down specific experience that I could do to get those requirements. So that was mapping it out, obviously, is the best way to do it, and figuring out what experience you wanted to put under each section.
And same question to you, Jennifer. What are some good resources, if any, that helps you map out your relevant competencies and better understand the competency requirements?
I think 2 things. So look beyond your province's like resources, and CPA BC has a lot, but then I remember referring to Ontario, because there are just different examples. The more you see, the more you can connect with what you do at your job. And also, I think the second thing is also find out what your coworkers or your manager are doing, because what they do might just like a light bulb might go on, because you have been reading that competency map, you've been like reading those descriptions over and over, and all of a sudden you realize, oh, this person's task actually fits this criteria. So then you can start working on a plan to how to get that task under your belt. Then I think that's it's like you keep repeating this process. You look at the wording, you look at what you do, you look at what other people do, and then you look at the wording again.
Thank you. And the next question we have is, what is your #1 tip or pointer for someone struggling with completing their experience requirements under EVR? Paul, should we come to you first?
Sure. So, I mean, I'm finishing up EVR myself, so I can't really say how necessarily to finish it off, because that's what I'm trying to do. But in terms of trying to finish your experience reporting, if we're talking about your final report, then you'd want to look closely at the technical requirements and the enabling competency requirements, and look at what's required of you to get those level 2s. You want to understand as well, when you get into the PERT, when you log into PERT, you're going to see 4 different areas that you need check marks in. So you need to understand what those 4 areas are: core, depth, and so on. You're going to want to know what each of those areas are, so you know how many level 2s and level 1s you need in your technical competencies, and where those need to be depending on what area of work you're doing. But other than that, you want to just look at your experience and make sure that what you're writing about is hitting the mark for those level 2s, and you're going to have a little bit of a guide, at least to give you an idea of where those should be. Yeah, I think that's all I have on that one.
Yeah, great answer. Thanks, Paul. And we'll get one more of you to answer that as well. Carly, if you wouldn't mind answering. So just to repeat the question, what is your #1 tip or pointer for someone struggling completing their experience requirements under EVR?
Well, it depends what you're struggling with. If you're struggling to actually sit down and write it, what I did is I would schedule, okay, I'm going to write this one specific one on this one day. I'm not going to sit down and try to write the whole experience report in one sitting. So I scheduled about 2 per week, and then would sit down for about an hour to an hour and a half and write 1 per day and then 1 on a different day. But if you're struggling to get the correct experience, I would suggest reaching out to somebody who's recently got their experience approved, to then read it over and see maybe what you're missing, or some suggestions that they can make to get that approved.
Great advice. Thank you, Carly. And Jennifer, if you'd like to answer this one, is it possible to write only technical section of a report and then report another report later to answer the enabling competency section for the same job and period?
Suzanne, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is you have to submit technical, but enabling is optional for every report. But I don't believe you can do enable but not technical for every report. But I'm actually not 100% sure on that. However, my advice is try to submit as many as you can, only because the waiting period for the CPA reviewer to get back to you will go to waste if you only submit like one thing when you could have written like 5, because those feedback, especially in the beginning, it's like so critical to getting your part done on time towards the end, I think.
Yeah, perhaps we can bring in Suzanne. Are you able to offer any insights or answer this question?
Thank you, Jennifer. You did a great job. That is all correct. And we do encourage that as much as you have to report, whether that's the technical or the enabling competencies, put it in. The more you're able to really paint the picture on what you do in the role really just helps give the reviewers a much more holistic idea of what you're doing. So yes, everything that you said is right on track.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. Okay, so it looks like our Q&A questions are all answered. Just seeing if we've got any others that that usually crop up. Oh, we have one more in here. So how did you organize yourself with your reporting? Did you use calendar reminders to keep yourself on track, or set time blocks to work on your reporting? Carly, if you can take that one.
Yeah, so for the specific deadlines in reporting, I did set calendar deadlines. And then when I was going to submit my final report, I created sort of a monthly calendar and said, okay, I'm going to work on this specific technical on this day, and then sort of scheduled it that way.
Great. And Paul, can you answer the same question?
Sure. I mean, I wasn't as proactive with it. I found that I was catching up some of my reports. But then when I was catching them up, of course, I had some to do. So yeah, keeping a calendar is really helpful. Setting a deadline that you take seriously for yourself is really helpful. I found once I got writing one, I wanted to be, so I started talking with my mentor and my supervisor, so they're aware that I'm writing it. And there's a little bit of kind of a social aspect where you feel like, well, now you've told them I have to have it in soon. I can't just string it along for months if I'm telling them I'm writing it. That helps a little bit. But once you get started on one, you should be looking to complete it, you know, if you're writing it over time, that's fine. But then when you get to the point where you're saying, okay, I'm tying it together and I want to have this one in, you should be working to get it done. So I just spent every Sunday, actually every Saturday and Sunday for 3 or 4 weeks, and just at least 4 hours on each of those days, I would just go and write until I was done.
Thanks, Paul. And this next question is for Carly and Jennifer specifically. Having had gone through the experience of reporting on technical competencies, can you share one tip on how to best structure your response to meet the level 2 proficiency? Thanks, Carly.
Yeah, so using the CPA way is incredibly important. So listing out your issue first, and then your analysis, your conclusion, and then recommendation. If you don't structure your reports that way, you're never going to get to a 2. So that is sort of the only way to structure your reports to get those 2s on the technical.
Thanks, Carly. And Jennifer?
And to add to that, 3 examples was what I was aiming for. It didn't have to be 3 like complex, super complex examples, but 3. And also it ties into why I think it's best that you write it as soon as you finish the task, because your thought process that become default because you've been doing the task like over and over. Those are the things that the reviewer is looking for, because you're adding value as you progress in your career. You are noticing anomalies or like something, you're investigating variances. And these are the things that you want to write in your response, and not so much like I analyze the financial statement and that's it. Because if you just read that, the reviewer is not going to understand why you did it, because you have experience and not someone who is just starting their finance career. So make sure you don't discount your work, you don't discount your value, and just write it all out. It's the time for you to show off what you have, what you're offering to your workplace.
That's a great answer to finish on. Thank you, Jennifer. So just briefly, we do have lots of events coming up, but one that I wanted to touch on quickly is our CPA BC career work, which is coming up in January, from January 17th to 19th. And this is an all-in-one hybrid event featuring career workshops, employee information sessions, speed interviews, career fairs, and much more as well. So if you're in a stage where you're looking for a job or looking to switch roles, then a registration is now open for our CPA BC Career Week. But with that being said, I would like to wrap things up now. So a huge thank you to Jennifer, Carly, and Paul. Thank you all so much for sharing your stories and for taking the time to answer questions from the audience this afternoon. We really appreciate it. And thank you to all of our attendees as well for joining us today. We hope you were able to learn something today that you did not know about the CPA designation or accounting as a whole. If you are looking for more information about CPA or accounting, please feel free to look at our website or connect with us through social media or email. And if you haven't already done so, you can always sign up for our Career Connect e-newsletter. It just takes a couple of minutes to sign up, and you are able to unsubscribe at any time. And please feel free to fill out a quick survey at the end of this webinar to give us your feedback as well. Again, thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you all.